So section 9.4, testing hypothesis with standard deviation unknown. The second part here is to use the critical value approach. So looking at our critical value, using the same example that we were looking at with our p-value approach, we're going to try to test if the null hypothesis can be rejected using the critical value approach. So again, what we were looking at was an alpha level at 0.05. This is for our airport rating scenario. So we have to figure out what the t-value is for our alpha of 0.05, and then we're going to compare that to our test statistic. So to get the t-value for 0.05, we're going to use the Excel formula equals t.inv, and then in our parentheses we're going to put our alpha level of 0.05, and then we're going to put our degrees of freedom. In this case, it's 59. If you'll recall, we had a sample size of 60. Again, our degree of freedom is going to be our sample size minus 1. So we get 59. When we compute this in Excel, we're going to get a negative t-value. So remember that we're dealing with the upper tail here. So we're going to take that, and the negative value is showing us, because Excel is always going to show us what is below the point that we indicate. So we're getting a negative 1.671 in Excel, which is showing our lower tail area. We're testing our upper tail area because we want to know if our test is greater than or equal to what we get for our alpha. So t-value 1.671. So that's our first piece. If you recall, when we conducted our test in our previous video, we were looking at a score of 1.84. That was our t-value. And to compute that, we took our sample mean minus our mean of 7. Whoops, let me scoot that up here. So our sample mean minus our population mean, our sample standard, over our sample standard deviation divided by the square root of n. And in this case, we had 7.25 minus 7. Our sample standard deviation was 1.052. And we took that divided by the square root of 60, and we ended up with 1.84. So what do we do with this information? Okay, so we know that our t-value for our test is 1.84. And we know that we're going to reject our null hypothesis if our t-value is equal to or greater than or equal to what our critical value is, which is 0.05. So we can reject the null hypothesis and conclude that London Heathrow Airport should receive superior rating by the business travelers, the surveys that they took, because 1.84 is greater than 1.671, which was the t-value for our t-score for our critical value approach. So again, this is the critical value approach. The critical value approach is going to compare the t-scores of our alpha level, which was 0.05, and the t-score from our sample. This concludes section 9.4.